Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's Way Forward Workshop Leader Lunch Break, where we are pleased to welcome Erika Rudin-Luria. Erika was appointed to the role of president of the Jewish Federation of Cleveland in 2019 as only the fifth person to serve in this role in the 120-year history of the institution. This was the culmination of an almost 20-year career with the Federation, as she ascended from supporting foundation manager to senior vice president and chief strategy officer. A native New Yorker, Erika moved here with her family about 21 years ago with plans to stay just a few years. They chose Cleveland over other cities because of our ethnic neighborhoods, but they stayed because of the people and the vibrant Jewish community. As she said in a recent interview, when recognized as a 2022 Crain's Woman of Note, "We just fell in love with Cleveland." She assumed the presidency with a forward vision and strategy, and months later came the pandemic. Her leadership guided the Federation and the Jewish community through some very difficult times, and she focused on meeting the needs and responding to the concerns with a constant stream of open communication. She's known for being an accessible, strong, and confident leader who has rightfully earned the trust of her community. As she wrote several years ago, her aspiration is to find a way to work as one community across our diverse communities and political perspectives here in Cleveland. She's recently taken this message internationally with travel to Poland and into Ukraine. She must lead with her head as well as her heart, for she is responsible for overseeing over 120 employees, a budget of about $16 million, and oversight of $3 billion in assets. And we are proud to call her an alum of Leadership Cleveland 2020. Welcome, Erika.
Thank you so much. My mother would have loved that introduction if she were on. And really, thank you for having me. My experience with the Cleveland Leadership Center has been all about being inspired by and connecting with other leaders, and so that we can all as individuals and as a community make an impact together. And that was certainly my experience with Leadership Cleveland 2020, the class that never ended, although I know we have now finally graduated. And so I'm going to speak for a minute about the mission of the Jewish Federation of Cleveland and how we achieve that mission. And most of what I'm going to say is going to be focused on anti-Semitism, because that is what I was asked to speak about today. And I just want to acknowledge so many friends and partners who are around this screen who really could be speaking just as easily as I can be. And so I just want to say that right up front. So I do know how to do this. Let me share the screen and just a few slides. So first, on Federation, while our largest area of focus is the planning and fundraising for the social service, education, and security needs of the Cleveland Jewish community, we're also very involved and committed to the city of Cleveland. And we do a significant amount of work in social services in Israel, St. Petersburg, and the former Soviet Union. Our most public activity that many of you have likely heard of is our annual campaign that funds a group of local, national, and overseas organizations. Last year, we raised over $34 million. We also raise additional funds for community priorities, security, which we'll touch on, unfortunately, today, as well as most recently, Ukraine relief and humanitarian needs in Ethiopia, which is one of our, we're working on helping people immigrate from Ethiopia to Israel. Additionally, we have over 700 donor advised funds and over 50 supporting foundations, which make us one of the largest grant makers in the state of Ohio. So enough about Federation. We're going to talk today about Jew hatred, as most of you are probably more familiar with it being called anti-Semitism. And I will tell you that up until the last few years, this is not something that I ever spoke about. I actually was one of those people who believed that while anti-Semitism existed, it had been driven underground successfully and was not going to emerge in a pervasive way. And I was totally wrong, and which is incredibly disappointing, not being wrong. That I'm used to, but the state that we're in right now. So anti-Semitism generally shows up and is manifested locally in one of three ways: assault, violence, harassment, or vandalism. And I want to just show you a few slides. I took these from AJC's website. AJC and ADL are federation's main partners within the Jewish community in fighting anti-Semitism, and they have just a wealth of information online. Anti-Semitism is really the world's oldest conspiracy theory. So in Charlottesville, we all remember the marchers saying the Jews will not replace us. The marchers were not saying that the Jews themselves were going to replace them. They were saying that the Jews who control the world and who have a conspiracy to control the world are going to replace them with people of color. And that is an example of this conspiracy theory. It comes from the protocols of the Elders of Zion. You've all heard about the Illuminati, the Cabal. Another example of this is when you hear someone called a globalist, or you hear references to the Rothschilds being all powerful. So another example, more recently, the hostage situation in Colleyville, Texas, which was in a synagogue that was like buried in a small community, not something that you would happen upon. The terrorists assumed that that rabbi would be connected to another rabbi, a well-known rabbi in New York, and that person, because they are a Jewish leader, was all powerful and would be able to cause the release of a terrorist. Again, it's all underpinned by this conspiracy theory. Ambassador Deborah Lipstadt reminds us, though, that anti-Semitism, she says, it punches up and punches down. So while Jews in this whole framework are all powerful, and that's the punching up, they're also rodents and termites. And actually, this term, the whole anti-termite, this was actually used by the Nazis as the excuse for the extermination and genocide of Jews during World War II and during the Holocaust. Oh, hold on, that means that's sharing. So talking with you all, though, about how this impacts, how we see this show up and how this impacts us. In terms of other statements that we're all familiar with, the Jews controlling the media, it's all about the Benjamin's babies. Regardless of where these fall from politicians on the political spectrum, they're actually referencing the same exact conspiracy theory as each other. And we see this come up, frankly, throughout not just the political spectrum, but we see this on social media regularly as well. During the war against Hamas in May 2021, hashtag Hitler was right was trending online. If you have questions about it, I'm happy to talk about Israel. That hashtag Hitler was right clearly crosses the line beyond political criticism and into what we would call Jew hatred or anti-Semitism. So according to the FBI, the Jewish community is the #1 target of faith-based hate crimes in the United States. And data that was released by our partner, the Anti-Defamation League, in April showed that in Ohio alone, there's been a 92% increase in anti-Semitic events in the past 5 years. So what does this actually mean? And how does this impact the local Jewish community? So just last week, a Jewish business owner had "Kill All the Jews" spray painted on the side of their building. A few days earlier, a Jewish organization on the East Side was spray painted with graffiti. A few weeks earlier, a phone call came into a local synagogue that all Jews must die. In June, we all saw the reports about the Cleveland police officer who was suspended over previous anti-Semitic social media comments, including, "Let me salute Hitler the Great." He said, "I would have killed all the Jews in the world, but I kept some around to show why I killed them." A few different types of examples over the last year. There have been multiple times where Jewish kids and families that are visibly Jewish, that wear a kippah, that are dressed for the Sabbath, have had bottles or eggs thrown at them while expletives are yelled. Kids have worn swastikas to games played against East Side suburban school districts. There was a White Lives Matter rally outside of the Maltz Museum because no Jew is considered white to white supremacists. And by the way, side note, for those of you that travel to Israel, you know actually that the Jewish community is exceptionally diverse and that the majority of Jews in Israel are not actually white-facing. Last fall, and this maybe was one of the scariest things that's happened here, a man entered a Jewish grocery store and was harassing people and yelling things. And the store manager told him to leave. He went to his car and got an axe and threatened to kill the store manager and a young Jewish boy. And I already mentioned the May 2021, what was endured by our kids and teenagers, and I guess those of us who are also on TikTok, who are not kids and teenagers. So this is the reality that our community is living in right now. I'll just quickly say that Federation's Community Relations Committee, in partnership with AJC and ADL within the Jewish community, and in partnership with many of the people on this screen throughout Cleveland, work to reduce ignorance and anti-Semitism, but really all types of hate. We generally say, and you can see this historically, that anti-Semitism is the canary in the coal mine, meaning oftentimes it's the first hate, it never ends there. It always grows. And there's a saying in Jewish life and history that the world was destroyed because of baseless hatred. And so we see it as our job to fight against that in all realms. So we do this through building relationships, through education, through fighting hate and ignorance in a multitude of different ways. And when all else fails, because of hate-fueled violence, we have a very large security program in the Jewish community. And deep relationships with law enforcement, who are incredible partners to us. But I looked at the budget for security for next year yesterday, and it's $4.9 million. And that is beyond what any one organization within the community spends. However, we want to make sure that people are able to live freely, and we don't feel like we have another option. So anyways, anti-Semitism is actually my least favorite thing to speak about, but I'm happy to open up for questions and to talk more about this or about anything else that anyone on the screen would like to talk about.
Erika, thank you for sharing what your community has been experiencing and what we're seeing across the world. Can you give some specific examples of some of those current programs and initiatives that the Federation provides to help combat anti-Semitism?
Sure. So some of it is education in school districts. And that is really AJC, ADL, Federation, the Maltz Museum, all have a role within this. Some of it is really as simple, though, as building relationships with other ethnic and faith-based communities who also struggle with hate, so that there is understanding just across our diverse, community. Some of it is we have a phenomenal, I'm going to pick on Tom and Joni, Adler Civic Leaders mission that does beautiful things in terms of building understanding between people and each other in so many different ways, where we're all able to then, coming out of the Adler mission, there have been so many programs and initiatives that are really all about fighting the things that we care about and helping people and fighting trauma. And I find that sometimes what's most effective, and our community relations department really promotes this, when you work with something, when you work with people on something that you both care about, you're able to build relationships and get to know each other in a way that's deeper, and that's not not superficial. And we work with different media. We work with, when we see something or hear about something that's anti-Semitic, we pick up the phone and others pick up the phone, because there are times when people say things that they do not realize come from this underpinning. All of us need to be educated about what different words mean to different people. And so we try to do that with a very open mind, working on an individual basis, on an organizational basis, with local politicians, really with media, with everyone.
You mentioned that the high incidence of anti-Semitism and hate crimes here in Ohio.
Mm-hmm.
Do you know where Ohio stands in relations to other states?
So I do not know. I know that we've seen an increase in the United States in general, but I don't know. I'll tell you, within our, we're part of a regional intelligence center, and with a number of other cities. And we kind of look at the driving distance, so that if there's an issue in Louisville, that person can drive within one day, right? If someone hates there, they're a threat. If someone is in Pittsburgh, they're a threat. If someone's in Detroit, they're a threat. And of course, Akron, Toledo, Canton, all of the Cincinnati, Columbus, all the places, that you would expect. So in terms of looking at threats that our security or local law enforcement need to be aware of, we really, our folks look and are involved nationally with intelligence, but a lot of focus is given to the region that we're in and how we can partner on information and sharing of information and security with others that are in that, driving distance.
And as you work within this space, where do you run into challenges, and how do you work to overcome those challenges?
Sure. So I think that there are many people who don't want to look at their own political party. And the truth is, we all need to fight it within our own circles. We all need to look. So when Republicans are the ones that are pointing it out to Republicans and Democrats are pointing it out to Democrats, or people who sit on a board or committee together are willing to speak up, that's effective. I've seen more over the last few years, though, that I'll get an email from someone where they'll say, someone at this meeting I was at in this other part of Cleveland said such and such about Jews, and I didn't know what to do. And I think that we got so used to anti-Semitism not being acceptable that as it's come out of the woodwork, and as then people who generally are well-intentioned, as people are repeating things that don't necessarily realize what they're repeating, sometimes the Jews and allies around the table don't know how to respond. And that's something that we're working on right now, is helping people to find that voice again. And I'll say social media is a real problem. All of our kids have so many challenges today. COVID really messed with them. And I know mental health was a challenge before COVID, and in my experience and in the work we do with Belfair and Jewish Family Services and others who obviously serve broad communities within Cleveland, we see this everywhere. So when a child is on the other side of bullying and racism and hate, what that does to their identity is horrific. And so social media is a real problem. We don't always know, and then we can't help that child in terms of what they've seen online. I'll tell you, at the beginning of COVID, one of the first cases in town was a member of the Jewish community. There were kids jumping away from my kids at school and other schools and saying, it's the Jew flu. Now, there's a line between joking and when that becomes I can't go near you because you have something. So those are the sorts of things. And I found there was an incident where last summer where there was a car driving. There had been people spraying paintballs at Jews in Los Angeles a few days later. In a neighborhood that's more observant, there was someone driving who saw some identifiable Jewish teenagers and sprayed paintball at them. I learned about it Shabbat morning, and so Shabbat afternoon, I walked from where I live into Beechwood, and just to talk to the kids. And my kids are teenagers, so like some of the kids know me. And as they were talking, I realized, like, in the same way my kids and probably all of your kids don't share everything with you, more had happened that nobody was sharing. And so I also think getting people to say, someone will say, oh, a bottle was thrown, it wasn't a big deal. Okay, but if that same car regularly does that, and it moves from an egg to a can to a glass bottle, that's actually an issue. Like, that is actually a big deal. And so those are some of, this is the sum of, what keeps me.
So Erika, how do you and your staff kind of take care of yourself when you are working through such heavy and challenging topics?
So thank you for asking. I will tell you that we are so privileged to be in a position where we can make a difference. So Marianne mentioned, I've been to Poland twice and went into Ukraine one of those times. I was in Ethiopia, I think it was 2 months ago now, to do some humanitarian work. It is an amazing privilege to be in a position to be able to help people. And when you're talking to someone who's undergone trauma and what people have dealt with in Ukraine and what people live in every day in Ethiopia is, it's almost inconceivable in terms of the hardship. And the fact that then we're able to do something to make their lives better or to help them feel supported, it feeds us. It feeds my team too. They're hard issues. I would so much rather be in the middle of it where I can see how we can help people. So no, it doesn't solve everything. And I loved the question that I saw pop up, the how do we get rid of this? And if anyone has an answer, I'm all ears and ready to partner. But I will tell you, actively fighting it and doing something to assist individuals or to help people, whether in Cleveland, Jewish Cleveland, Ukraine, Ethiopia, Israel, not feel alone, and knowing that you're making a difference in an individual's life is a really incredible privilege to have.
So let's look ahead. Let's look ahead to the work that you're doing with the Federation. Can you share some highlights of your vision for the future of the Federation?
Sure. I think Marianne mentioned, I'm very interested in how, in building community in general. There's a concept in Jewish life. It's called an argument for the sake of heaven. There were these two houses, rabbis that disagreed about everything. I mean, fundamental, huge disagreements, like the kind that we see out in Cleveland and in our world. And but they argued for the sake of education and understanding, not in order to win. Actually, their children all married each other. Like, that's how much they respected each other's arguments. And I look at that and I think about the civil discourse that's needed in order to improve Cleveland and Ohio and our world. And part of what I imagine is that this is something that that the Jewish community and that federation can be very engaged in within Cleveland, within Ohio, within the United States. And so that's one of the things that I think a lot about. I'm very concerned about security. We've talked a lot about that, so I'll move on. I'm concerned about mental health and what COVID has done for people not hoping. We know, like, without hope, a lot of bad things happen. And people stopped being able to make plans. And I think that was exceptionally detrimental. And we're seeing some like post-trauma related to it. And so it's something we're keeping a very, very close eye on right now. And so just as a few of the things that I'm thinking about, we're watching closely what's happening in Ukraine. I'll say that we're very concerned about what we're hearing and about what we're not hearing. We know that some of the people that I've met with that have been rescued, their rescuers, it's kind of crazy, had directions on WhatsApp as to how to navigate around landmines and Russian military. And so I try to remember, whatever our challenges are here in Cleveland, that there are people that are living under war and trauma that we cannot imagine. I want to bring more Clevelanders to Israel. I want people to see the complexity and the beauty and the challenge. And I want them to see themselves and experience it themselves. Just a handful of things.
Just a few things. So you mentioned hope. So as you look around, what gives you hope?
The people. I have never experienced a city other than Cleveland where I believe people really want each other to succeed. And I think we saw that during COVID, when someone identified a need, people swarmed around the Zoom screen to be part of meeting that needs. The level of engagement and volunteerism within Cleveland and our quality of leadership, Cleveland is exceptionally unique. And we're very focused always on building leaders and who are the future leaders. The future looks exceptionally bright. And that gives me great hope.
And for those of us on the call who want to build ourselves as allies and support your work, what advice do you have for us?
I'd say, first of all, you should go to the AJC website because they have a phenomenal dictionary, and it's easy to read and access and has just great succinct language. I'd say that when someone says something, speak up, ask a question, point it out to them what they've said. The majority of time, it's not going to be someone who's anti-Semitic. They don't know what they're repeating. But thanks, Rob, for posting that. But ask the question, when it comes to Israel, which we didn't talk a lot about, political criticism is okay. Crossing the line to say that Israel should be wiped from the map or doesn't exist or Hitler was right crosses a line. And we need to point out to people that it crosses a line. And ask questions. Just when something doesn't sound right, ask questions, dig deeper into it, and feel free to call me and to call Rob Barrett and to call Debbie Klein. And as you have ideas, we want to partner. We want, we want to work with others on so many different things, this being just one of them.
Well, Erika, we thank you for sharing your work and your passion with us, and we will be sure to share the link in the follow-up email and encourage everyone to follow up and to speak up in our community. And with that, I'm going to turn it back to Mary Ann.
Thanks, Rachel. Erika, thank you so very much for your honest and beautifully delivered message. I think you have a lot of people on this call who feel much better equipped and will probably reach out to you for greater assistance. So thank you.